I always imagined the morning of my wedding would feel like a hymn rising through stained glass, soft and holy and full of promise. Instead, it felt like a held breath inside a museum where even sunlight seemed trained to behave. The Hale estate in Richmond shimmered beneath winter frost magnolias, dusted silver musicians rehearsing gentle strings in the garden below the bridal suite. Everything was beautiful in that way beauty can sometimes feel like a warning. I sat before an antique mirror in a gown that took 6 fittings and 2 seamstresses to perfect lace trembling across my shoulders like snow waiting to fall. My fingers rested on my bouquet, steady at first, then tremoring ever so slightly as though they knew before my mind did that something was coming. My mother, Margaret, glided in first, pearls posture eyes that had practiced elegance so long they forgot warmth. She touched my veil the way one adjusts a curtain in a room meant for display. Behind her came my brother Chase, always composed suit tailored like armor confidence wrapped around him like a tailored birthright. He carried a white envelope outlined in gold. The moment it touched the vanity, I felt the air shift. My mother smiled, the kind of smile people wear when every gesture is a performance. She spoke in that composed Southern tone that can sound like love to strangers and like command to those raised inside it. "A legacy gift for your future," she murmured. $3 million. A blessing and a responsibility. I knew responsibility in our family did not mean support. It meant surrender. Chase set the envelope gently as if it were scripture. His voice held the same practiced steadiness. "Sign into the family trust. I will manage assets. It protects our name." There it was. Not love, not celebration. Control wrapped in silk and tradition. I kept my voice calm. "I am marrying Andrew. I am building a life, not handing one away." My mother did not flinch. "Legacy demands discipline." She leaned toward me. "Do not embarrass us today. That word us always meant them, never me." Chase's jaw tightened. "You owe us. Every privilege you have is from this family." The air thickened. Lace against my ribs felt suddenly tight. I stood. My voice stayed measured, though my heartbeat pressed against my gown like it wanted to run. "I owe you gratitude, not ownership." The silence in the room turned sharp. Chase's eyes changed first. Surprise, then insult, then something darker, a storm forming behind calm Southern breeding. My mother looked at him, then back at me. "You will sign." Her certainty came from a lifetime of my obedience. But this time I did not lower my gaze. My fingers brushed the small silver button hidden beneath the bouquet ribbon, the safety device Andrew insisted I keep, just in case he had said softly. I had laughed then, unaware he had given me a lifeline. Now it felt like a pulse beneath my thumb. A bridal attendant knocked faintly outside. Voices drifted laughter, the sound of champagne glasses, the world expecting beauty and vows and Southern grace. Chase moved first. I saw his hand reach not with hesitation, but with inheritance, with the reflex of a son raised to believe consequences did not apply to him. A flash of metallic reflection from the ceremonial cake cutter resting beside the champagne bucket. My breath caught less from shock than recognition. I thought for years silence kept me safe. I was wrong. Pain bloomed sharp, then heavy, not described by color or shape, just a dizzying heat beneath satin. My knees softened, the world tilted like a portrait knocked off a wall. I heard my mother's voice through the ringing in my ears. "Do not make a scene." The words slid into my chest colder than any physical blow. My gown pulled around me silk, whispering against marble. I tried to draw breath, but the room narrowed. I tasted metal and winter air and something else, something fierce rising inside me like a final refusal to disappear. A bridesmaid's laughter from the hallway cut suddenly into a gasp. The door burst open, hands came into view, then footsteps thundering. Andrew's voice reached me before his face did. "Juliet, stay with me. Stay here." His arms lifted me steady but trembling. My vision blurred edges like watercolor left in rain. His face hovered above mine. Fear and fury collided behind soft brown eyes. "I am here. You are safe. Do not close your eyes." I did not want to close them. I wanted to see everything. I wanted to remember who chose silence and who chose me. Paramedics moved quickly, voices sharp but calm. I heard someone say possible trauma. I heard someone else say hurry. I felt air against my skin as I was moved, and the cold felt honest in a way my childhood never had. My mother stood at the doorway perfectly still, watching not with panic but with calculation as though deciding what story to tell the world. Andrew pressed his forehead to mine for a second as the stretcher locked. His voice shook. "I will not let them bury you in quiet," I whispered through breath strained. No more silence. The sirens rose, drowning string music still playing somewhere outside. As we left the estate, I kept my eyes open, not from strength, but from promise. They built their world on my quiet. They would watch me rise without it. If you ever stayed quiet because you thought it kept you safe, tell me not anymore in the comments below. I sometimes think my life began not with my first breath, but with the first rule I ever learned. Southern grace is not spoken, it is performed. My earliest memories are bathed in soft Virginia sunlight, reflecting off the James River, the Hale estate stretching wide like it knew generations would kneel to it. From the outside, we looked like a portrait of tradition. Brick columns, horses grazing in emerald pastures, my mother Margaret arranging flowers in the foyer, while classical music floated from hidden speakers. People say old money whispers. In my family, it did not whisper, it dictated. When my father was alive, the house felt different. He was a senator's son with gentle manners and a voice that carried warmth instead of command. I remember his hands guiding mine as we fed the horses at dawn, the smell of hay and river mist, his laugh low and easy. He never asked me to be perfect. He simply asked me to be present. He died when I was 8, a sudden illness. One week, he was strong enough to lift me high above the stables, and the next week, the house was filled with casseroles and condolences and the kind of silence that feels like someone removed all the air. My mother grieved with the same restraint she wore to charity galas. Not a hair out of place, not a tear where anyone could see. Grief like emotion belonged behind closed doors. Within a year, she remarried. Harrison Whitlock of the Whitlock Banking Group arrived with polished shoes and colder eyes. I remember the first dinner after the wedding. The table seemed longer, the candles taller. Harrison raised a glass and offered a toast to legacy honor and the Hale Whitlock future. My brother Chase, older by 3 years, soaked up the new authority like a drought-stricken field tasting rain, though there was nothing nourishing in it. He was suddenly the heir, not just to one name, but 2, and he walked with the pride of someone who believed the world was born to serve him. I, on the other hand, learned a new family motto: Southern grace, quiet honor, perfect reputation. It was repeated the way some families teach bedtime prayers, each word a thread binding me tighter into a role I never asked to play. Ladies do not raise their voices. Ladies do not challenge the men who provide for them. Ladies hold themselves with dignity, which meant never disagreeing in public and never revealing pain. My lessons in womanhood came not from books or teachers, but from observing my mother glide through life like a perfectly staged doll. Her voice soft, her posture rigid, her smile polished. She taught me to pour tea without rattling the china, to curtsy at cotillion practice, to thank men for opinions that smothered mine. Chase did not need lessons. He was praised simply for existing. If he recited 3 lines in a school program, it was a triumph. If I earned a medal in debate, it was tucked away so it would not overshadow him. I once came home clutching a state academic award, cheeks flushed with pride. My mother stroked my hair and congratulated me in private, then placed the certificate in a drawer instead of the family display cabinet. "We would not want Chase to feel inadequate," she murmured. That was the day pride first tasted like sin. At school, I learned to listen more than speak, to be pleasant instead of powerful. When I excelled, I apologized for it. When Chase stumbled, I learned to applaud. He crashed his first car at 17. No one scolded him. Instead, there was talk of boys being boys and how young men deserve second chances. When he was caught drinking at a country club after hours, the security staff was encouraged quietly to forget. Respectable families do not air their struggles. Meanwhile, when I wanted to join a summer political youth program, my mother pressed a white glove to my cheek and said it was admirable but unnecessary. Husband and home are your future darling. Keep your mind gentle. Every time I showed strength, the world around me worked to sand it down, so I learned silence. Not at once, but like a habit slowly becoming instinct. Silence when a teacher praised me, and I saw Chase's face tighten. Silence when Harrison complimented my posture, but never my opinions. Silence when my mother told me beauty opens doors and loud thoughts close them. There were other lessons, too. How to stand perfectly still during portraits. How to smile without showing too much tooth. How to accept compliments with lowered eyes. How to stay graceful even when grace felt like a cage disguised as virtue. Some moments cling to me like dust on velvet. I remember walking into the Jefferson Hotel lobby with my mother, both of us in winter coats, chandeliers glittering above. I heard two women whisper, "She trains that girl like she trains her horses." Not cruel, simply factual. I remember dance lessons for the annual winter cotillion. Girls gliding in pale dresses while mothers corrected posture with gentle but merciless hands. Chase practiced occasionally, but mostly he joked with gentlemen in tailored jackets. I practiced every night until my toes bruised. Yet at the ball, all eyes went to Chase. Young men admired him, and mothers told their daughters to stand straighter when he passed. I learned to float, to pretend the air around me was silk rather than glass, to fold pain into poise. Outside the estate, life looked like belonging. Inside, it felt like performance. I think my deepest humiliation was not a single moment. It was the accumulation of tiny ones. Sitting through dinners where men debated politics and finance, while I was asked about garden clubs and volunteer hours. Hearing my mother say women like us support greatness, we do not compete with it. Watching Chase fail upward each time life protected him like a velvet rope around privilege. Little by little, I tucked parts of myself away. Ambition became duty. Curiosity became quiet. Anger became decorum. I grew polished, pretty polite, perfect in the way a porcelain doll is perfect. Lovely to look at, easy to set aside, impossible to hear. But inside me, something restless lingered, a spark inherited not from pedigree, but from the father who once lifted me into morning light and told me I could be anything. That spark did not disappear. It waited. It learned how to hide. It learned that in my family, silence was survival. Yet silence is not the same as surrender. I did not know that yet. All I knew then was this. In the Hale household, girls were raised like magnolia blossoms, decorative, fragrant, fragile by design. But even magnolias have deep roots, and one day roots remember they were made to grow, not merely to hold still. By the time Chase and I reached our late teens, the world had already been instructed to orbit him. If I was the carefully polished heirloom displayed for elegance, he was the legacy promise, the one groomed to carry the Hale name into boardrooms and gentlemen's clubs with the confidence of someone who believed history bent to his convenience. When Chase turned 16, my mother gifted him a vintage sports car, a machine gleaming beneath the porte cochere like wealth made visible. 6 months later, it sat crumpled against a stone wall near Carey Street. The official story was slick roads after rain, but in private whispers I overheard adults murmur about bourbon on his breath and the quiet arrival of a family attorney long before dawn. My mother did not express anger. She expressed gratitude that no one was injured and relief that respectable families solve problems internally. I learned early that privilege is not merely access, it is erasure of consequence. Chase moved through life cushioned by softness, every risk absorbed by the family name. When he turned 18, he announced he wanted to run his own investment firm. He had taken one summer finance course and returned with a vocabulary full of confidence and half-formed jargon. Within a year, the venture collapsed quietly, expensively, privately. My mother called it an educational phase. I remember hearing Harrison say, "Ambition like that is admirable in a young man." The message was clear. Failure was a noble step on Chase's journey. Meanwhile, I graduated top of my class. My mother kissed my cheek, whispered she was proud in a voice reserved for enclosed spaces, then redirected attention to Chase's next endeavor. Boys carry legacy. Girls protect it. That sentence anchored itself deep inside me, settling like silt at the bottom of a riverbed. Every time I showed the world what I could do, my mother gently reminded me to soften it. Do not threaten him. Success is not flattering to a man if it overshadows him. She rarely spoke in commands. She spoke in shaping suggestions designed to sound like care. I believed them because I was raised to believe that being loved by a powerful family meant making yourself small enough to fit inside their image. The first time my independence was used as currency, I was 19. My trust fund had rules. Show grace, show restraint, behave in accordance with the family standard. At the time, it did not feel like confinement. It felt like tradition. The Hale women did not rebel. They navigated. They smiled. They protected the name by being the quiet strength behind it. That is what I thought strength looked like until I realized quiet can become a lock if you never tested the door. Our social world orbited prestigious charity galas, old stone churches, polished ballrooms with chandeliers that sparkled like frozen history. At the Virginia Hunt Ball, teenage boys in tuxedos strutted with inherited boldness while girls in silk gowns practiced making themselves graceful spectators. Chase thrived in that environment. His swagger was applauded, his occasional arrogance seen as youthful confidence. I remember watching him stand at the center of a laughing circle, telling stories about business plans and vineyard acquisitions as though opportunities waited simply because he wished for them. He believed he was born to lead. Everyone around him believed it too, because no one had ever shown him limitation. I moved differently through those rooms. I had posture, poise, manners honed like fine cutlery. My mother made sure of it. Yet beneath every introduction, beneath every polite conversation about horse breeding lines or historic preservation committees, there was an unspoken contract. Men held power. Women displayed it. During teas at the Jefferson Hotel, I observed the way mothers coached daughters through conversations, the way praise for ambition was always followed by advice to stay graceful, stay pleasant, stay easy to be around. Ambition was allowed, but only if it fit inside lace and pearls. The women of that world did not shout to command attention. They whispered and watched the room bend. I thought that was power for a long time. Soft influence, subtle direction. I even admired it, yet every lesson came with a shadow. Influence only mattered if it served the men who held the keys. I once overheard Harrison mentoring Chase in the study. Real power never raises its voice, son. It just knows the right hands to shake. To Chase, that meant entitlement. To me, it meant a world where voices like mine would never be considered steady hands worth trusting with authority. When I earned a scholarship recommendation letter from a senator who admired my debate work, my mother framed it as a sign of refinement rather than potential. She placed it in a drawer and told me a lady's worth does not depend on titles or achievements, but on dignity and grace. I nodded, trained by years of being shaped, but inside I felt a flicker of something like irritation mixed with longing. I wanted to be seen, not displayed. I wanted my accomplishments to breathe. Yet every time I pushed forward, someone gently guided me back into the pattern. Girls protect legacy. We do not lead it. Meanwhile, Chase experimented with careers like one might choose ties, confident each pivot was a noble pursuit. When his second business idea faltered, my mother blamed the market, not his inexperience. She never said anything outright to diminish me. Instead, she praised my gentleness, my reliability, my steadiness. Compliments that felt like velvet ropes. I learned that in our world, appearance was not just presentation, it was currency. Reputation replaced talent. Secrets bolstered reputation, and intimidation was simply courtesy with sharper edges. I absorbed it all. I watched my mother greet rivals with sweetness sharp enough to draw blood without leaving marks. I watched powerful men smile with warmth while delivering quiet threats under their breath. I watched how silence wielded correctly could command a room as effectively as any speech. I admired their mastery even as it carved away pieces of me. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being praised for qualities designed to keep you contained. A loneliness dressed in pearls, smiling in photographs, applauding a brother who believed winning was his birthright and that my pride should never shine brighter than his. It was not one moment that built my cage. It was every softened command, every redirected spotlight, every graceful expectation planted like seeds that grew into vines. I wore dresses chosen for modest elegance, delivered lines rehearsed for poise, attended events designed to reinforce our place among Virginia's finest families. And all the while, I learned. I learned how power hides in softness, how secrets protect status, and how intimidation can live inside a smile. I learned that silence can be both armor and prison. Most dangerously, I learned to mistake obedience for love. And once you confuse the two, it becomes easy for those in power to convince you that loyalty means silence, and silence means virtue. That belief shaped my youth like gentle pressure over wet clay. It was only when love entered my life from outside that world that I realized clay hardens. And one day, if shaped by the wrong hands, it can crack just enough for light to get in and begin breaking everything open. I met Andrew Porter on a Tuesday morning in March 2021, the kind of day when Virginia spring pretends to arrive early, sending sunlight across sidewalks like an invitation to breathe again. I had accompanied a coworker to Richmond Memorial Hospital after she fainted at work. It was meant to be a routine visit, something forgettable. Instead, fate placed me in the fluorescent hum of a small emergency department waiting room where a man with tired eyes and a kind smile offered me a cup of water without asking if I needed one. Andrew was not what the Hale world considered remarkable. He did not wear a tailored suit or polished cufflinks. His scrubs were clean but worn at the edges, his hair slightly tousled from a long overnight shift, and there was a faint crease between his eyebrows that told me he had carried other people's pain long before I met him. When he asked whether I was all right, he didn't say it like a hospital formality. He said it like he genuinely wanted to know, like my answer mattered independent of who I belonged to. I should have brushed it off, thanked him, politely returned to my gilded quiet life. Instead, I found myself talking. We spoke about little things at first. Weather, the absurdity of early spring allergies, the way Richmond lilacs bloom too fast after frost. Then deeper things without meaning to. His time serving as a military medic overseas, the nights when adrenaline kept him awake even after his shift was done. The strange comfort of hospital hallways and the weight of seeing too much life and death too young. He did not brag. He did not dramatize. He simply spoke, and as he did, something inside me, something hidden beneath silk and etiquette, shifted. When he asked for my number before I left, I hesitated just long enough to remember every rule etched into me since childhood. Hale women do not rush. Hale women do not step outside approved circles. Hale women do not bring home ordinary men. And yet my fingers moved anyway, handing my phone to him before my conditioning could remind me I was not raised to choose freely. Our first date was nothing grand coffee on a quiet street in the Fan District and a walk by the James River. We sat on a park bench, cherry blossoms drifting like fragile confetti, and I laughed so loudly at one of his stories that an older couple walking past smiled at us. It felt startling how natural joy came. I grew up learning that happiness was something you curated, polished, scheduled into existence. With Andrew, happiness didn't feel earned. It simply happened. He asked questions no one in my world ever asked. What do you want, Juliet, not what your family expects? When did you last rest without guilt? Who are you when no one is watching? No one had ever cared to know the answers. I realized then that most people in my life loved a version of me polished for display. Andrew saw the woman behind the polish and sat beside her like that was enough. The first time I introduced him to my mother was Easter brunch, April 2022, at the country club. White tablecloths, butter shaped like flowers, and the hush of money muttering approval around crystal glasses. My mother examined Andrew with quiet disdain, hidden beneath social grace. She nodded politely as Andrew shook her hand, then turned to me with a smile so tight it should have cracked porcelain. "Good man," she murmured, pleasant tone masking judgment. "Wrong pedigree." She delivered those words not as insult, but as simple truth, like discussing weather patterns or monogram styles. I felt heat climb my neck, shame mixed with fury, a familiar tightening I had spent years swallowing. Andrew squeezed my hand under the table, calm, grounded, unaware of the tectonic shift his presence created. After that day, subtle pressure returned to my life like an old ghost. Harrison asked Andrew about his career with the kind of politeness that feels like interrogation. My mother mentioned eligible bachelors from established families during tea, smiling as though she were offering me opportunities rather than reminding me of my place. Chase teased, then mocked, then dismissed Andrew entirely. "You are slumming it out of rebellion, Juliet. It will pass. He always said my name wrong when he wanted to remind me I wasn't fully seen." But the more my family pulled, the more I leaned into Andrew's quiet steadiness. He showed up after shifts carrying coffee flowers picked from his mother's garden, or simply his presence warm and real. He did not ask me to be perfect. He asked me to be present. That was new. Terrifying, liberating, dangerous in the world I was raised in. By fall, I began therapy quietly slipping into a cozy office above a bookstore on Main Street. I spoke about duty reputation, quiet expectations disguised as love. I spoke about silences that suffocate and pride cultures that swallow daughters whole. My therapist told me my voice shook because it had been caged too long. She told me cages lined with velvet still trap you. She told me love is not fear dressed in pearls. Those sessions cracked something in me that had been frozen since childhood. I started tasting my own thoughts instead of swallowing theirs. I started imagining a life not built on names or invitations or curated photographs. I started believing I deserved joy that did not come with rules attached. Every lesson loosened the hold my family had over me. Every moment with Andrew widened the space between who I was taught to be and who I was becoming. Happiness, I learned, is danger in families built on control. Love, real love, is rebellion when obedience has been your inheritance. And without knowing it, Andrew became the match that ignited a fuse my family spent 30 years wrapping around me. I did not know then how bright the explosion would be, or how much of my old world would burn before I stepped out of it alive. The evening of our engagement dinner at La Mer inside the Jefferson Hotel felt like stepping into a portrait my family had rehearsed for decades. Chandeliers glowed like molten pearls, the air perfumed with white lilies and aged bourbon, and soft piano drifted over the clink of crystal glasses. Richmond's old money filled the room with quiet arrogance, silk dresses brushing marble floors, cufflinks shining like tiny declarations of superiority. It should have been the beginning of a beautiful chapter. Instead, it became the night I realized my family would rather break me than watch me choose a life outside their script. I walked in on Andrew's arm, his hand warm and steady along my spine, grounding me. He looked handsome in a simple navy suit not tailored with generational expectation, but worn with humility and earned quiet confidence. My mother lifted her face toward us like a queen, acknowledging guests, her pearls sitting high at her neck, her smile polished to a perfect blade. "Darling, such a lovely evening," she breathed, kissing my cheek lightly as though affection were something fragile and expensive. Her eyes slid to Andrew, assessing, dissecting, calculating. "Nurses are noble, dear, but we are hale." The words floated out smooth and almost gentle, but I felt them hit my ribs like pressure from a corset pulled one notch too tight. Andrew only nodded politely. "Thank you, Mrs. Hale. I am honored to be here." His tone, calm, respectful, unwavering. I squeezed his hand under the table as we sat. My mother's smile held, but the air sharpened. This was a stage, and I had brought an unscripted character into the scene. The first toast was harmless enough. Harrison rose with a raised glass, grinning in his politician-style voice, smooth as a velvet rope closing off access. "To love, to legacy, and to standing traditions." The table murmured approval. I felt Andrew tense slightly beside me, hearing the emphasis. My champagne tasted metallic. Then Chase stood. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect entitlement. He clinked his glass with theatrical grace eyes, sweeping the table before landing on us with amusement carved into his smirk. To my little sister, Juliet, always full of surprises. And to Andrew, who certainly lucked out. A ripple of low laughter floated around the table, the kind of laugh that slides under the skin like ice water. Chase continued, his voice a lazy drawl. "Not every man finds himself welcomed into a family like ours. Count your blessings, friend." He lifted his glass and winked. A joke, but not a joke. Andrew's hand tightened around mine. My cheeks burned not from embarrassment, but from shame at ever thinking my family could behave with grace when confronted by something real. Andrew cleared his throat lightly. "With all respect, Chase, I believe I am the lucky one. Juliet is brilliant, kind, and stronger than most people give her credit for." A pause fell. It was polite, deliberate, and devastating. Chase's smirk faltered. A few heads turned. My mother blinked, her smile stiffening at the edges. Then she released a light laugh, tinkling brittle. Sensitivity is sweet, Andrew. But we find strength takes discipline, not sentiment. My breath caught. The room suddenly felt smaller, as if every chandelier leaned in to listen, every pearl necklace tightened. Andrew did not flinch. I do not see compassion as weakness. I see it as character. The table went still. That single sentence felt like someone opening a window in a suffocating house. My mother's fork paused mid-air. Chase's jaw clenched. Harrison's eyes narrowed. And yet, Andrew sat tall, unaffected, as if truth was not something to hide behind china plates. Conversation resumed awkwardly, but the tone had shifted. I saw narrowed eyes and tight lips, all of them recalibrating how to handle this man who refused to bow to pedigree. Dessert arrived, lavender honey cake served with gold-rimmed plates. Mother smiled again, too wide. Juliet has always been very sheltered. Andrew nodded once. I would say she has been very controlled. Her smile dropped a fraction, just enough for me to see the crack her poise tried so hard to hide. Beneath the tablecloth, my hand trembled, not from fear, from awakening. When dinner ended, guests rose with air kisses and compliments laced with curiosity, watching Andrew like he might stain the velvet chairs if he sat too long. As we walked toward the exit, Chase brushed past me and whispered, "You can still come to your senses, sis. This little rebellion thing will get tiring." He did not bother lowering his voice enough. Andrew heard. I watched him inhale slowly, not out of anger, but control. That is when I understood real power did not roar. It stood steady. Outside, the warm Virginia night wrapped around us, street lamps glowing like fireflies caught in glass. Andrew took my hands and looked at me like he saw the storm under my silk dress and still chose to stand with me. "Are you all right, Jules?" he asked softly. I nodded, then shook my head, the truth pushing past years of trained stillness. I am tired of bowing. My voice cracked but did not break. He brushed his thumb across my cheek. "Then stop bowing. You do not owe anyone that." I exhaled like I had been holding breath for years. I looked back at the hotel entrance where my mother's silhouette lingered behind glass like a judgmental ghost guarding tradition. I whispered more to myself than to him, "I am done kneeling." The city hummed. The moon hung low and watchful. Something ancient inside me stirred. Not rebellion. Return. Return to myself, to my voice, to a life where love is a partnership, not a leash. Andrew squeezed my fingers gently and led me toward the car. And with each step, I felt the weight of my lineage fall away like shattered crystal under soft hotel light. My family did not know it yet, but everything shifted that night. Empires do not fall in storms. They fall when someone finally stops pretending they are sacred. Has anyone ever mocked the person who saved you? Comment never again. The morning of my wedding arrived wrapped in winter silk, the kind of December frost that clung to magnolia leaves like sugar, and painted the estate grounds with a softness that felt unreal, like a dream someone else curated for me. I woke before dawn, heart beating with both anticipation and dread, a strange mix of hope and warning tangled beneath my ribs. Outside my window, the sun crept slowly over the James River, turning the sky pale pink, gentle as breath. String musicians practiced quietly somewhere beyond the terrace, their violins and cellos sending elegant notes drifting through the corridors like ghosts of tradition, whispering that today must remain perfect. I sat at the vanity while stylists fluttered around me, pinning my hair in soft waves, dusting blush along my cheekbones, securing pearl combs that had belonged to Hale women for 3 generations. Their hands moved efficiently, praising, adjusting, smoothing, and every compliment landed like a reminder that beauty in my family was not joy. It was duty. My wedding gown rested across a chaise ivory silk shimmering under morning light, lace delicate as breath. It should have felt like stepping into a new life. Instead, it felt like stepping into a cage covered in flowers. At 8:30, a knock sounded crisp and authoritative. My mother entered without waiting, her posture regal as ever, her pearls gleaming like small, perfect promises no one could escape. She carried a leather binder tied with a satin ribbon the color of champagne. Her voice floated in smooth and practiced. "Before the ceremony begins, we have final matters to attend." She placed the binder on the vanity in front of me gently, the way one might place a crown before a queen. When I untied the ribbon, my breath hitched. Inside lay documents, trust agreements, asset assignments, signatures waiting. The title read, "Hail Family Continuity and Legacy Stewardship." I felt the walls close in. She touched my shoulder lightly. "Legacy before love. Juliet, do not forget what you represent." I forced my voice steady. "I represent myself today." Her smile froze just a fraction. "Duty remains." She tapped a signature page. "You will sign before you walk down that aisle. We must ensure you and Andrew do not merge assets without proper oversight. This is procedure, dear. It is protection." I looked at the page. $3 million noted. Contingencies. Co-trusteeship assigned to Chase. I swallowed hard. My future placed in my brother's hands. My mother held out a pen as though she were offering a blessing. Chase entered, then perfectly pressed suit smirk, soft but poisonous. "Let us not delay things. We would hate to make guests wait." I felt heat rise behind my sternum. "I am not signing today." My mother's expression did not flicker. She simply reached for the pen again. "Emotion is not clarity. Choose wisely." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed from the vanity. I glanced down. A voicemail from Chase, sent only minutes earlier. The notification glowed like a warning flare. Without hesitation, I lifted the phone with careful fingers, pressed play quietly. Chase's voice filled the room low and edged. "Do not make this difficult. Do not embarrass us. If you force me, I will fix this." "You know I will." His words slid into the elegant room like a blade hidden in lace. The hair on my arms lifted, my pulse slowed into something steady and cold. I tucked the phone under my robe sleeve and pressed record on the voice memo app. Silence learned young becomes instinct. My mother reached to close the binder, confident. "We will revisit this before your vows." Bridesmaids entered, then laughing softly, unaware, holding mimosas and satin robes. The tension dissolved into polite smiles, practiced greetings. My mother brushed my hair once more like she was smoothing a veil instead of threats. "I will return. Do not keep us waiting." She swept out Chase, following their perfume and entitlement lingering like winter shadow. When the door clicked shut, one bridesmaid exhaled sharply. "That felt intense," she whispered. I offered a tight smile. "Old families take weddings seriously." She paused. That was not serious. That was something else. I looked away, chest tight. "Survival teaches you to lie without moving your lips." Stylists returned and the room spun back into glamour. Flowers arrived. The photographer captured soft happiness. Bridesmaids hummed to classical music, adjusting earrings, steaming dresses, murmuring excitement. Yet every sound felt distant, like I was underwater watching the world through glass. At 9:45, Andrew slipped in, quietly escorted by the coordinator. He wore his uniform dress blues medals shining softly, not as symbols of legacy but proof of service. He smiled at me and suddenly the room warmed. His presence felt like a hand holding mine in a burning building. He kissed my temple gently, careful not to disturb anything. "Almost time," he whispered. "You look unbelievable." My throat tightened. His eyes searched mine, concern flickering. "Tell me you are all right." I hesitated just long enough for him to notice. He lowered his voice. "I know your family. I know pressure when I see it. I will not make you walk into anything alone." Then he reached into my bouquet fingers, brushing silk ribbon. He pressed a tiny silver button hidden among the white roses, a small security device no larger than a charm. "If you feel unsafe, press it. It alerts the on-site team and my phone." He squeezed my hand, just in case. Those words cracked the final layer inside me. I had always been the quiet daughter, the agreeable one, the girl who let storms rage around her without daring to disturb the air. But now, a man who loved me for who I was looked at me like he saw the storm inside me and trusted me to command it. He kissed my forehead once before leaving. I watched him go, shoulders straight, unwavering. When the door closed, I stared down at the bouquet. The tiny button gleamed like rebellion disguised as a petal. My bridesmaids returned laughter, returning with them, but their smiles faltered when they saw my expression. The room went quieter. One bridesmaid placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You do not have to pretend with us." I swallowed. My voice was soft but clear. "I am fine." And then quieter, not for them, but for me. "I am choosing my life." The clock ticked toward ceremony time. The estate grounds glowed in winter gold magnolias rustling in the breeze. Somewhere beyond the window, guests arrived in fur wraps and tailored coats, ready to witness tradition unaware it was about to be interrupted. The music swelled. My gown waited. My future waited. So did theirs. Legacy before love had been my family's creed. Today, I would break it. Not with rage, with choice. Silence had been survival. Now it was strategy. I smoothed the veil along my shoulders, felt the weight of pearls breathed deeply. This time when I looked in the mirror, I did not see the hale daughter trained to obey. I saw a woman about to step into fire and walk through it not quietly, but with truth pressing against her bones. I whispered to my reflection steady as winter air. Not theirs. Not anymore. The door opened. It was time. I remember the sound first. Not the music or the murmurs of guests waiting in polished rows beneath winter magnolias. Not the quartet tuning strings in soft anticipation. The sound was small, almost insignificant, the hush of a door settling into its frame as if the world held its breath beside me. The bridal suite glowed in candlelight and reflected champagne tones. My veil shimmered like frost, my bouquet rested against silk, and every detail felt curated to perfection. Except the air. The air was wrong. Too still. Too heavy. My mother entered first, her expression a porcelain portrait of composure. Chase followed, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched like he had been chewing anger for breakfast. Their footsteps did not echo. Entitlement rarely announces itself loudly. I stood, gown flowing around me like snowfall hands soft at my sides. I had thought I was ready. But readiness means nothing in the face of fanatic legacy. My mother's voice arrived first calm as silver laid on linen. "This foolishness ends now." Chase stepped forward, not with fury in his stride, but with controlled menace. The kind of danger only arrogance breeds. "Sign it, Juliet." The binder, closed but heavy, rested on the vanity. I felt my pulse flicker. I shook my head once. I said no. My voice did not tremble. It should have been a triumph. It became a trigger. Chase's face clouded a storm, moving behind eyes used to absolute obedience. He reached for the binder, opened it, shoved the signature page toward me like scripture. "Do not make this necessary." I lifted my chin. "I am not property." The final fracture. The moment control met defiance and shattered. His hand moved faster than rage. Cake knife silver resting beside champagne flutes and crystal bowls filled with winter berries. Ceremony beauty. Ceremony weapon. He did not shout. He did not warn. A clean arc of motion. Steel glinting beneath chandelier light. A sudden pressure like ice breaking inside me. No scream. No sound. Just shock, cold and sharp. Then heat blooming under silk, spreading like spilled wine. My breath caught, suspended, stolen. My vision wavered. My knees softened. Gravity whispered, "Fall." I pressed one hand to my side, instinctively fingers touching lace that warmed under crimson. Lace meant for vows. Now stained for truth. The room tilted. Sound faded into a thick hum. Chase's face twisted, not guilt, but disbelief. He had never encountered consequences strong enough to stop him. My mother stepped forward, closing distance with terrifying grace. Her hands reached not for me, but for the door. She placed her palm against it quietly, guarding the world outside from the imperfection inside. Her voice was soft, deadly. "Do not make a scene." The words cut deeper than steel ever could. I tried to breathe, but it felt like pulling ice through my lungs. I sank. Slowly, as if my body insisted on dignity even in collapse. My veil spread like wings around me. Silk kissed marble. My bouquet rolled. My hand brushed the hidden button Andrew had placed there. A tiny mercy in a gilded prison. I pressed. The click, nearly silent, echoed in my chest louder than a scream. My mother leaned over me, smoothing my veil like arranging display china. Pain is temporary. Silence protects us. My vision blurred, lace pearls frost blood. Footsteps outside, hurried whispers. Someone tried the doorknob. My mother stood taller. "Compose yourself, Juliet. Guests are waiting." I tasted metal fear resolve. I forced air into my lungs, fighting darkness creeping like a tide. I would not disappear quietly. A voice outside rose in panic. "Where is the bride?" The door burst open, bridesmaids tumbling in, gasping as if the world cracked open. Then Andrew. He did not enter so much as rush collision of fear and fury. His face turned ghost white, then flushed with terror. He dropped beside me, arms wrapping me, lifting, anchoring. "Stay with me." His voice trembled. "You stay with me, Jules." His hands pressed against my wound, gentle, yet urgent warmth through fabric, soaked in red. Security shouted, radios crackled, chaos bloomed. Chase backed away, face pale, shaking like a man confused by the existence of fallout. "It was an accident." He stammered empty words. Andrew looked up, voice low, shaking with more power than yelling ever held. "You did this!" The world spun, but I held his collar, grounding myself. Not again. Not silent. Paramedics arrived. Voices steady trained. Pressure, elevate, move. A stretcher. Hands lifting me gently. My mother stepped back, still poised like a queen in denial of revolution. "Do not exaggerate." Andrew's roar was not loud. It was lethal. "She is bleeding. While you worry about appearances." She flinched, faint but real. A crack in porcelain. I held Andrew's hand, knuckles white, breath ragged, my voice barely present. No more silence. He bent low, forehead against mine. "I am right here." Sirens, winter air biting, sky spinning gently overhead. I stared up, blinking against blur, frost dusting magnolia branches. The ambulance doors slammed. Andrew held my hand as paramedics worked. Oxygen clipped, pressure dressings, IV piercing skin. Numbers shouted calmly. BP dropping. "Get ready to intubate." Andrew's voice strained. "She is a fighter. She is." "Stay with me, Jules. Squeeze my hand." I squeezed, faint, but there. Not strength. Defiance. The world dimmed around flashing lights and cold metal and controlled urgency. Paramedic voice above me, confident. "She is holding." "Let's go." Tires moved. Sirens cut the air. Andrew pressed his forehead to my temple. "If you go somewhere, I go with you." My eyes fluttered. Pain radiated. But through the haze, clarity rose. Not fear. Fury. I thought of childhood bows and silences, country club whispers, and rehearsed obedience. I thought of pearls resting on betrayal of a brother raised to believe everything belonged to him, including me. I thought of a mother who chose reputation over blood. And in the quiet between heartbeats, I made a promise. I will not disappear for them. I will not make myself small so they can look whole. I will rise louder than their legacy. The ambulance jerked. Machines beeped. A paramedic called vitals. Andrew brushed my hair back, tears falling silently. "Fight with me." My eyes closed, not surrender, but gathering strength. Rage cooled into steel. Betrayal hardened into purpose. They tried to silence me under lace. They would hear me without it. Darkness swelled, but this time I did not fear it. I entered it holding truth like a blade. And in the last second before consciousness dissolved, I whispered inside myself, steady and sharp. "They will never bury me again." When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. First, the smell sharp antiseptic with a hint of sterile cold, then the hum of fluorescent lights, steady and unfeeling, and finally the soft rhythmic beep of a heart monitor that tethered me back to the world like a reluctant anchor. Richmond Memorial Hospital. I knew the sound of those halls even before I opened my eyes. Andrew had walked them 1,000 times, patching up strangers with care my family never understood. I blinked slowly, heavy, like my eyelids had been stitched with sand. A soft hand touched mine, warm, familiar present. Andrew. His head lay near my shoulder, his posture folding into exhausted prayer. He looked up when he felt my fingers twitch, and relief washed over his face like morning sun breaking through storm clouds. "Jules," he whispered, voice raw and frayed. "You are here, and I am not going anywhere." He tried to smile, but grief clung to the edges. A nurse entered quietly, kindness written in the lines of her tired eyes. "Morning, sweetheart. You scared a few angels on your way in." I tried to speak, but my throat burned like embers. She raised a cup of water to my lips. "Sip slow. You are safe." That word hit differently in a hospital bed than it ever had in my childhood home. Safe. Like something earned, not inherited. The nurse glanced at Andrew with gentle understanding, then leaned closer to me. Her voice softened into something protective, almost maternal. "You don't have to protect him." Eyes flicked toward the hallway. I knew instantly who she meant. My family. Even here, their presence seeped through walls, trying to control the narrative. Andrew leaned forward, squeezing my hand. "Police want to talk to you when you feel ready." I nodded faintly. Then the door opened. Perfume, expensive and cold, floated in ahead of her. My mother entered like she owned the room, pearls, immaculate posture, straight expression, calm in a way only someone accustomed to sculpting reality could maintain. She stood beside the bed, not touching, not bending, simply hovering like judgment given human form. "Darling," she murmured, a performer stepping back on stage. "You frightened us." Her eyes darted to Andrew with restrained disdain. Then back to me. "This has gone far enough. Fix it quietly before it grows legs." Her voice carried the same tone she used when I was scolded for wrinkling a dress as a child, light, dismissive, firm. "Remember who we are. Do not disgrace the family." I stared at her, the woman who pressed silence into me like pearls against my throat. My chest ached, not from the wound alone, but from memory, years of swallowed wants and disciplined tears. But pain sometimes becomes clarity, and clarity becomes rebellion. I did not whisper. I did not bow. I looked her in the eye and said, voice hoarse but steady, "I am not your porcelain." Shock flickered in her gaze, brief but real, like a chandelier trembling from unexpected thunder. She opened her mouth, but Andrew rose, placing himself between us without raising his voice. "She needs rest. Leave." Mother bristled. "This is family business." Andrew's voice did not shake. "Then treat her like family." The nurse returned instinct, sensing fracture, and stepped closer. "Hospital policy allows us to remove visitors causing distress." For a moment, power shifted. Not loud, not violent, just truth outweighing tradition. Mother's lips thinned. She turned toward me one last time. "You will regret this." Then she left heels, clicking down the hall like a retreating army refusing to accept defeat. The room exhaled. Andrew sat again, rubbing his tired face. A soft knock followed. A woman stepped in, badge glinting under hospital lights. Lieutenant Sarah Morgan, Richmond Police. Her presence carried quiet authority. No theatrics, just truth with structure. "I would like to take your statement when you are ready," she said gently. I swallowed, nodding. Andrew's hand gripped mine. Her gaze moved between us, recognizing something in the silent exchange. "When you are able," she continued, "we will review what happened. There are recordings from the venue. There are witnesses. You do not have to endure this alone." She placed a card on the bedside table and left as softly as she entered. The room felt strangely warm. Evidence, witnesses, reality documented beyond my mother's control. For the first time in my life, the truth felt louder than legacy. Andrew brushed a thumb along my knuckles. "When you are strong enough, a friend from my unit wants to connect you with a lawyer. Good one. Someone who knows what real battles look like." I breathed slowly, feeling pain and clarity intertwine. A lawyer, a witness, a voice I could finally use. A nurse adjusted my IV, then paused, looking at me with quiet certainty. You survived them once. You can do it again. Her words were a gift, a reminder. Andrew leaned forward, pressing his forehead to mine. We fight smart. Whatever storm they start, we finish. Emotion rose in my chest like a wave, but instead of drowning, I floated. Hurt, yes. Betrayed, violently. But not broken, not mute. The world beyond the glass windows glowed with winter morning light, pale but persistent. I closed my eyes, letting breath fill me slow and steady. They taught me silence was safety. They taught me obedience was dignity. But lying in that bed scar forming where control had once lived, I understood something they never wanted me to learn. My voice was not a threat to my life. It was the beginning of it. And as Andrew sat beside me, fingers intertwined with mine, I knew the war they started would not end in whispers and closed doors. It would end in truth, spoken out loud, and I would not flinch from the sound of my own strength. I had been porcelain once, shiny, delicate, fragile enough to display, but never allowed to break without consequence. Now I was something else entirely. Not glass, not lace. Steel learning how to breathe. Healing came in bruised layers, not neat chapters. I spent 5 days in the hospital drifting between pain and clarity, learning how to breathe without expecting someone else to inhale for me. Andrew never left. Nurses whispered about loyalty and rare love. Lieutenant Sarah Morgan stopped by, twice voice-steady presence grounding. My mother did not return. Chase did not call. Silence from them used to feel like punishment. Now it felt like distance being carved wide enough for me to finally exhale. When I was discharged, Andrew wheeled me through the hospital doors into crisp winter air. Snow dusted the parking lot. The world continued moving, even as mine had detonated. Waiting near the entrance stood a woman in a charcoal coat, hair tied back, posture upright like she had never once asked permission to take space. Evelyn Shaw, the lawyer Andrew's friend recommended. Former JAG officer. Courtroom reputation whispered, like rumor sharp as a winter blade. Andrew introduced us quietly. Miss Hale, she greeted, voice smooth, steady. I prefer Juliet, I replied. She nodded once. Then let us begin with Truth Juliet. No bowing to legacy today. That sentence hit me like the first deep breath after years underwater. We sat in a quiet conference room adjacent to the hospital neutral ground walls the color of calm. Evelyn opened a slim leather folder, though her eyes stayed on mine more than the papers. First step, she said. We gather, we preserve, we do not react emotionally, we respond strategically, like we are already winning. Andrew squeezed my hand. Evelyn listed tasks with lethal calm. Text messages, voicemails, contract drafts, witness statements, venue footage, medical documentation. We build a wall of fact so high they cannot climb it. She slid a digital recorder forward. Now, tell me everything exactly as it happened. I spoke, voice low but steady, describing lace ablaid my mother's hand on the door, the button hidden in my bouquet. Evelyn did not interrupt. She only listened, pen motionless. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. They hid violence behind etiquette. We will not give them the luxury of quiet. She tapped her pen once. What do you have recorded so far? I opened my phone, heart thudding. Voicemails. The one where Chase whispered threat like routine. Do not embarrass us. If you force me, I will fix this. Evelyn pressed play, listening with composure so still it felt like judgment forming. Good, she murmured. Very good. We will subpoena wedding venue footage. My stomach tightened. What if cameras weren't pointed at us? Evelyn's lips curved, not warm, but assured. Wealthy families fear lawyers more than exposure. They often forget about cameras, but courts do not. Andrew leaned forward. Bridesmaids saw. They know. Evelyn nodded. We will get statements, anonymous if needed, and medical confirmation. Andrew spoke before I could. I asked the attending to be direct. He documented intentional force. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. Excellent. We will request a copy. Silence settled for a moment. The kind of silence that stands not in fear but preparation. Then Evelyn opened another file. Your family will not remain passive. Expect pressure, polite at first, threatening later. They will try suggestion, then shame, then money, then coercion. She folded her hands. You will not answer them, not alone. Call me immediately. Andrew's jaw tightened. They have already tried. Evelyn's attention snapped to him. Explain. Andrew's face cooled. A man watched our house yesterday. Suit. Pretended to check the meter. Evelyn nodded knowingly. They have engaged a private investigator. They will gather leverage or attempt intimidation. Expect contact. Speak as little as possible. Record everything. My pulse flickered with old instinct, the urge to retreat, bow smooth edges. But I inhaled slowly. I remembered lace-stained red, the look on Andrew's face to the nurse saying, "You don't have to protect him." "I am not afraid," I whispered. Evelyn studied me, then nodded once. Fear is expected. Choosing no is power. That phrase stayed with me. Choosing no is power. She handed me a slim digital recorder. Carry it. Use it. Practice one phrase aloud right now. I swallowed, throat tight. No. Again. No. Again. No. This time it came out sharper. Clean. Evelyn didn't smile, but something approving flickered like a match struck in the dark. You will not say it loudly. You will say it firmly. Power does not shout. It simply refuses. Andrew exhaled like he'd been holding breath for days. After she left, I sat with him in our car. Quiet wrapped around us, not like a cage, but like a blanket. He brushed a strand of hair from my face. Proud of you. I leaned into him, forehead against his. I am tired of being quiet, Andrew. He shook his head gently. You were not quiet. You were surviving. Now you are choosing. That is different. 2 days later, the first test arrived. My phone rang at dusk. Unknown number. I answered only because Evelyn instructed me to document. Miss Hale, a man said smoothly, voice oiled with practiced politeness. I represent the Hale family's interests. A firm name followed crisp expensive. We would like to resolve this matter amicably and prevent unnecessary distress. My heart pounded, but I pressed record silent. If you retract allegations and sign confidentiality agreements, compensation will be significant. Your future secure. Inhale. Exhale. No. His tone cooled. You are making this harder than needed. Legacy is fragile. Consequences ripple. No. You misunderstand your position. No. He exhaled, irritated. Expect difficulty. The line clicked dead. I sat still, pulse settling air sharp in my lungs. Andrew watched from across the room, pride shining quiet and fierce. The next evening, a car idled outside our house. Dark windows, engine running. Not subtle. Intimidation rarely is when arrogance fuels it. Evelyn called moments later, tone crisp. Document. Do not engage. Consider it their first mistake. 2 bridesmaids texted privately. We saw everything, Jules. We will stand for you. I felt something inside me uncoil. Not vengeance, validation. Then the hospital emailed medical findings. Injury consistent with intentional directed force. Words that turned truth into something legally undeniable. We held the report like armor. Evelyn arranged evidence neatly on her desk, each page a stone in the wall forming around me. They built a kingdom on silence, she murmured, eyes calm. You are building freedom on truth. That night, lying beside Andrew, my hand on the bandage over my wound, I practiced whispering my power aloud. No, not yours. My life. Rage no longer felt like fire. It felt like fuel. Quiet, but unstoppable. The storm my family ignited would not consume me. I was not porcelain. I was steel rising in winter light. And steel does not ask permission to exist. Richmond Courthouse did not look like a battlefield. It looked like history polished into marble and brass with columns reaching for a sky too calm for what was coming. Reporters gathered along the steps, pins ready, cameras angled, breath frosting in December air. I stepped from the car slowly, Andrew beside me. Evelyn just ahead, posture sharp enough to slice through expectation. My wound still tugged when I moved a quiet reminder of where obedience had once lived in my body. Not anymore. The Hale family arrived minutes later. They did not walk up the courthouse steps. They ascended them like royalty, returning to reclaim a throne. My mother in cream wool and pearls expression carved from ice. Harrison in tailored charcoal handshake ready for cameras. Chase in a navy suit that hung strangely wrong, now confidence cracked complexion pale beneath forced composure. They nodded to familiar faces in the crowd, pretending this was a charity gala or board appointment not reckoning. Their world relied on performance. Mine relied on truth. Inside the courtroom buzzed quiet and electric. Wooden pews, flags, a judge who looked like she'd seen every kind of power try to waltz past accountability. Evelyn took her place at counsel table, opening her folder with precision, every page a blade. My mother looked over, something sharp passing through her eyes, fear disguised as disdain. When proceedings began, the judge spoke plainly. "We are here regarding the matter of assault coercion and attempted cover-up involving Miss Juliet Hale." The courtroom stilled. Chase shifted. My mother's fingers pressed together like prayer or control. Evelyn rose. "Your Honor, we will be submitting audio evidence, sworn testimony, medical documentation, and video footage. No flourish, no aggression. Calm, lethal precision like she sharpened her voice overnight." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Evelyn pressed play on the first recording, Chase's voicemail, every syllable dripping entitlement and threat. "Do not embarrass us. If you force me, I will fix this. You know I will." A ripple moved through the room. Chase's face flushed jaw-clenching, then relaxing in practiced charm. "Misinterpreted," he said lightly. "Family emotions." The judge did not blink. "Next." Evelyn cued the second clip the private investigators call attempting resolution. "You misunderstand your position." Evelyn lifted one brow as if to say, "Not today." Then came the footage. Venue camera. The bridal suite door visible through a hallway angle. No graphic detail, no violence displayed, just chaos unfolding when the door burst open. Bridesmaids rushing. Andrew's voice raw and terrified. "She is bleeding." "While you worry about appearances." My mother's voice floated faint through the footage, unmistakable even to those who never heard her speak. "Do not make a scene. Guests are waiting." A gasp echoed somewhere behind me. Society women who once admired her sat stiff pearls frozen mid-breath. Old money hates scandal more than crime. Evelyn clicked to the next exhibit medical report. Injury consistent with intentional directed force. Judges rarely show emotion in small courthouses. This one leaned forward slightly. Intentional. Then bridesmaid statements clear and brave describing panic shock my mother blocking the doorway. I gripped the armrest, breath steady. Revenge did not feel like heat. It felt like cold light, truth carving through legacy. Chase cleared his throat. I panicked. "Accidental contact." His voice tried to soften into remorse, but arrogance leaked through like a stain. Evelyn stood. "Your Honor, the defendant did not call emergency services, did not seek aid, did not express concern in the aftermath. Instead, the family attempted to silence the victim." My mother rose chin high. "Our daughter has always been dramatic. We sought to protect her dignity." The courtroom stilled. Even carpet fibers seemed to hold breath. Evelyn turned slightly toward me. "Juliet, would you like to speak?" My pulse steadied. I stood slowly hand-bracing the table gown replaced by black dress veil, replaced by resolve. A lifetime of whispering sat behind my ribs, but I did not whisper now. I faced the judge, then turned slightly toward the family who raised me to be silent. I was never family. I was furniture. Gasps. Pens paused. Reporters leaned forward. My mother's mask cracked disbelief, flickering horror disguised as offense. I continued voice level steady like roots breaking stone. I was taught my silence protected legacy. I now understand it only protected cruelty. Chase stared at the floor. Harrison's jaw tightened. My mother whispered, barely audible but trembling, "Juliet." Her voice no longer command, a plea disguised as warning. I turned to the judge again. "I will not return to silence." The judge nodded once, almost imperceptibly. respect hiding in stillness. She spoke clearly. Based on evidence testimony and medical documentation, the court finds probable cause to pursue criminal charges: assault with intent, interference with emergency response, attempted coercion. The room exhaled like a storm broke. Chase's face drained as deputies approached. He muttered something not apology but confusion, disbelief that his world did not bend this time. My mother watched him, then looked at me, betrayal blazing where love should have lived. "You did this to us." I held her gaze unblinking. "No. You raised a son to believe harming me was his right. You did this to yourselves." Flashbulbs burst as reporters surged when court adjourned. Andrew placed a hand at my back, steadying me. Evelyn gathered documents like closing a chapter. Outside microphones rose like pointed spears. Miss Hale comment: "Was this abuse long-term? Did your family try to buy your silence? What happens now?" My mother exited moments later, reporters pivoting. She held her chin high, but her face, her carefully sculpted composure, cracked at the edges like porcelain dropped in slow motion. Cameras caught it, a dynasty fracturing in real time. I did not smile. Justice is not gloating, it is release. Evelyn guided me past the crowd, Andrew beside me like a shield, and witnessed both. Winter air sliced clean across my skin as we descended the courthouse steps, no longer walking into legacy, but out of it. For the first time, my body felt mine. My voice felt mine. The world no longer pressed me into a mold I never fit. I did not look back at the family behind me. I looked ahead where a life waited, uncurated, unchoreographed, real. Some battles are quiet until they are not. Some women are quiet until they are not, and when quiet women rise, the world hears differently. If you believe quiet women are the strongest, say, "I see her." Downfall does not always roar. Sometimes it slips in quietly like rot beneath polished floorboards, spreading until the entire house groans under the weight of truth. The Hale name, once spoken in Richmond drawing rooms like a password to legacy and grace, began to appear in headlines instead. Not the glossy society section. The financial misconduct column. First came whispers, a small leak about irregularities in Whitlock Banking Group's investment arm. Then, reporters dug deeper scent of scandal thick in winter air. A stock manipulation inquiry. Misreported assets. Loans quietly forgiven for friends with influence. For years, those rumors floated safely behind closed doors. But once the assault charges hit the courthouse steps, the press turned their lens wider. Legacy families rarely fall in isolation. They collapse in chapters. The stock dip happened first slow slide, then sudden plunge. Harrison denied everything, lips pulled tight in controlled fury during televised interviews, voice steady but eyes betraying panic. Wealth survives many storms, but reputation-driven wealth. It drowns faster. Social clubs moved next. The Jefferson Club board released a statement about maintaining standards. My mother's name removed from committees she once ruled like royalty. Charity boards sent polite letters, regretful but firm. "We appreciate your prior involvement. At this time, we are restructuring leadership." Translation: "You are poison now." The same women who once fawned over her pearls avoided eye contact in grocery aisles. Men who once greeted her with reverence suddenly pretended they had never shaken her hand. I did not celebrate, but I did not mourn either. Wrongdoing uncovered is not tragedy, it is consequence. Chase's sentencing came weeks later, the courtroom quieter this time, winter melting into early spring. The judge referenced evidence statements, medical documentation, and lack of remorse. 18 months with mandatory therapy, anger management, community service. Not long, but long enough to disrupt entitlement and introduce accountability for the first time in his life. Chase stared ahead as if reality were a foreign language he could not translate. His eyes held no apology, only disbelief that the world no longer bent around his wants. As deputies led him away, he looked at me, once confusion softening into something I could not name. Loss, resentment, or the terrifying possibility he finally saw me as a person, not background furniture in his kingdom. I felt nothing for him. Not hate, not triumph, just distance. A bridge burned so clean that no ash remained. The first time I faced my mother after the ruling, she appeared at mine and Andrew's small rented home without warning. Not the estate, not controlled grandeur. Our porch, a place built for living instead of performing. I saw her through the window, standing in tailored wool, chin held high out of habit, eyes tired in a way pearls could not disguise. I opened the door slowly. Winter chill slipped in behind her. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, my mother never physically shrank, but the aura around her, once impenetrable as marble, flickered like a candle in wind. Juliet, she began, voice catching faintly. For the first time I could remember, she hesitated. I waited. She inhaled, shallow and tight. Everything is crumbling. People talk. We need stability. A united front. Her words broke around the edges, desperation bleeding into refinement. Help us look respectable again. Respectable. That word. That idol. That altar I had bled myself on for 30 years. I stepped closer, not out of affection, but clarity. The girl raised to bow would have softened then. The woman carved from silence and rebuilt in truth did not. I lowered my voice until it cut sharper than shouting ever could. I survived you. I do not serve you. Her mouth opened, shock flashing, then wounded pride. We are your family. My voice didn't tremble. Family protects. Family does not sacrifice their daughter to reputation. She swallowed, throat tight. I could almost see her calculating whether softness or control would serve her. Neither did. Legacy before love had been her religion. Now she stood before someone who abandoned that altar. She turned to leave, but paused at the top step, spine straightening in habit. You think you have won. I shook my head. This was never about winning. It was about breathing. She left without another word, footsteps heavy dignity fraying behind her like thread pulled from brocade. Weeks passed. News stories continued. Social invitations vanished. The Hale Estate's gates, once symbols of exclusivity, now felt like walls of isolation. They had always been walls, they simply looked like it now. Old friends vanished. The world they worshipped, built on image and silence, collapsed under the weight of truth. In therapy, I learned something unexpected. Grief can attach itself to the family. You wish you had not the one you survived. Some mornings I awoke with heaviness in my chest. Not regret, but mourning the idea of mother and brother I once hoped existed under the polish. Now I knew better. They did not break me. They revealed themselves. Andrew stayed steady beside me through it all, warm hand in mine presence, like sunlight through blinds after a long winter night. Some evenings we sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, listening to cicadas return as spring warmed the air. Quiet, peaceful, real. No marble halls. No chandeliers, just breath and healing and the sound of a future forming not in legacy, but in choice. I sometimes think strength is not the loud moments, the courthouse, the confrontation, the headlines. Strength is the moment you sit in quiet and feel safe in your own skin for the first time. The Hale legacy did not disappear. It simply bowed to truth. And truth once spoken has no etiquette, only freedom. Healing did not thunder into my life. It arrived like dawn over the James River, slow and pale gold, quiet enough that if I had still been the woman taught to rush past herself, I might have missed it. Months after the courthouse. After the headlines softened and the world found a new scandal to chase, Andrew and I stood beneath an ancient oak at Maymont Park. No velvet seats, no magnolia-lined aisles, no string quartet hired for pedigree. Just dew on grass, morning sun brushing my cheeks, and a handful of friends who knew love meant showing up for the soul, not the picture. My dress was simple, soft, and ivory fabric that moved when the wind whispered. Andrew wore his dress blues again, not for display, but because they represented who he had become through service, not who anyone demanded he pretend to be. His hands trembled when he held mine, not from nerves, but from intention. I do not promise perfection, he said, voice rough with emotion. I promise partnership. I promise presence. I promise we rise together always. I felt tears gather not from pain now, but from the gentle shock of finally being loved in a way that did not require shrinking. My vows were simple too. I had spent a lifetime performing, Today, truth felt like luxury. "I promise to choose us," I whispered. "I promise to never disappear again." When he kissed me soft and steady, applause rose from our small circle, a chorus not of approval, but of witness. There was no mother straightening my posture, no brother smirking from privilege. There was only the sound of wind through trees and my heart learning a rhythm it had never been allowed to keep. In the weeks that followed, life expanded in ways legacy never taught me to value. I joined a trauma survivor advocacy group in Richmond, the same kind of quiet office above a bookstore where I had once first whispered my truth. I sat in circles with women and men who carried invisible scars and listened as they stitched themselves back together in language raw and beautiful. Sometimes I shared my story not with dramatic flair or whispered shame, but gently, like placing a stone down instead of carrying it another mile. The weight lifted each time. Healing, I learned, was not forgetting. It was remembering without surrendering to the ache. Mornings became ritual. Andrew and I walked along the James River before sunrise breath visible in the cool air, water cutting through city and memory alike. He held my hand, thumb tracing over the faint scar still healing near my ribs. At first, I stiffened every time he touched it, reflex born of pain. But slowly that touch changed. It did not feel like reminder. It felt like honor. "You are stronger than what happened," he would murmur. And I would answer, "I am stronger because I survived what tried to silence me." Some days the scar ached. Healing is not linear, my therapist reminded me. Some days you will feel invincible. Some days you will feel like glass again. But you are neither. You are human, and humans bend. They do not break unless they believe they must. I no longer believed I needed to break to be obedient. I had unlearned obedience and learned agency. I had unlearned shrinking and learned presence. One afternoon, sitting on a park bench, watching ducks ripple across the water, I lifted my shirt just enough to see the pale line near my rib cage. I touched it lightly, breath steady. This was not a wound now. It was a doorway. A place where I was pierced and still lived. A place where silence ended and voice began. A place where a dynasty cracked and a woman rose. "I am not porcelain," I whispered again to myself, not out of defiance anymore, but affirmation. "I am bone and breath and choice." Andrew looked at me, eyes soft with knowing, and nodded like he heard even when I did not speak. We walked home hand in hand, leaves crunching beneath our boots, sky warming to afternoon gold. No one bowed when we passed. No cameras flashed. No society column cared. And for the first time in my life, anonymity felt like luxury. Legacy before love had once sounded sacred. Now I knew better. Love without legacy was freedom. Voice without permission was power. Scar without shame was strength. I was not the Hale daughter anymore. I was simply Juliet, and for the first time that was not less. It was everything. If I could sit beside the girl I once was, the one who learned to hold her breath in silk-lined rooms, the one who folded herself small enough to fit inside other people's expectations, I would not scold her for compliance. I would not shame her for survival. I would touch her hand gently like Andrew did that first spring morning in the hospital waiting room, and I would say, "You were never weak for staying quiet. You were surviving in the only language you were taught." I would tell her about mornings by the river where the light stretches soft across the water and no one asks her to be ornamental. I would tell her about walking into a courthouse on legs still unsteady but spirit steady as steel and speaking truth without flinching, even when the people who raised her sat behind her like ghosts refusing to fade. I would tell her that the world she thought she could not live without was not a world at all, only a theater where she was cast as decorum and obedience, where applause came only when she performed quiet perfection. I would tell her she deserved more than applause. She deserved breath. She deserved space. She deserved to exist uncurated. I would brush her hair back like my mother once did, but this time not to make her perfect, to let her breathe. And I would say softly so she would hear it the way truth arrives after a lifetime of waiting. Power was never in silence. It was in choosing when to speak. I would watch her shoulders loosen, see the tight grip she held around her own heart soften. I would wait as she relearned the shape of her voice, the sound of her own name without legacy clinging to it. I would tell her that love will not demand she sacrifice herself. That companionship is not meant to shrink her, but to walk beside her as she grows. That one day she will stand beneath an old oak with a man who looks at her like she is not an accessory, but a person worth promising a lifetime to. I would tell her, strength is not in never bending. Strength is in bending without breaking and rising when bending no longer serves her. Strength is in saying no, even if her voice trembles the first time. Strength is in knowing porcelain only looks powerful bone and voice and choice are stronger. I would tell her legacy is not inherited. It is chosen. And she chose hers the day she refused to sign away her life, the day she pressed a tiny button hidden in a bouquet, the day she stood in a courtroom and refused to bow. And then I would take her hands in mine and whisper, "You did not lose a family. You found yourself. And that is enough. That is everything. If you ever had to step away from the people who were supposed to love you first, if you ever saved yourself when no one else did I see you. You are not dramatic. You are not ungrateful. You are brave for choosing peace over blood that bruised you. Healing is not betrayal, surviving is sacred work. If you ever walked away from the family that should have protected you, tell me in the comments, I choose me, and let me know where you are watching from. None of us rise alone. We rise together quietly, powerfully, one truth at a time.